Hello, this is Medard Gabel from the Global Solutions Lab. Today we're going to cover again, go into some detail on design science, the Global Solutions Lab. This is part 2, design science methodology. Part 1, design 101. You can see on another video, this will be a continuation of that and going into more depth. Quick recap, design we learned before is a generic, all-pervasive part of the universe and part of the universe that we participate in. Design science is a focused set of tools for bringing about change in the world. The Global Solutions Lab is where we use design and design science to create creative and implementable, viable solutions for changing the world. Part 1, as I said, was Design 101. This is design science methodology. In Design 101, we learn that everything is design, whether it's subatomic particles or families or waterfalls or trees, everything is design, and that you are a designer, that you participate in design all the time. What you did today, what problems you solved today are all have to do with design. Moving quickly along into why we're here, the introduction to design science and the design science planning process. Um, as a context for that, let me repeat something that Buckminster Fuller said. Humanity teeters on the threshold of revolution. It has to be success for all or none. If the revolution is a bloody one, as in all previous revolutions, humanity is through. The alternative is a design science revolution. So what we're talking about has some seriousness to it and some serious consequences, not just for the well-being of human beings who are hungry or uneducated or don't have energy supplies or are suffering from climate change, et cetera, but also having to do with the survival of our species on board Spaceship Earth. Another thing Fuller had to say, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes existing models obsolete. In other words, don't put band-aids on systemic problems, get to the not just the symptoms of the problem, but the real causes and change the system that's holding those problems and the symptoms in place. All right, a overview of the design science planning process. It is something it gives us a set of tools for changing the world, assuming that we see our job as developing a set of actions that get us from the problem, the present state, to the preferred state. The overview of this is just, okay, what's the problem? What are its symptoms? What are the causes of those symptoms? What is the system or the structure that contains those symptoms and causes? The problem state, and then what are the actions that need to change, that need to be implemented to go from the problem state to the preferred state? And what do we do, and when, where, and how, and what resources do we need, and including the funding. Preferred state is also where are we going, and what is the criteria we're going to use to evaluate both our options and measure our success. That's the quick broad brushstroke overview. Zooming in a little bit on that, we start off with asking the question, well, what is the most important problem facing the world? What is the most important problem that you think is critical to changing the world? And once we choose the problem situation, we want to go into what is the preferred state, not what is the problem and what are its symptoms, but what do you really want? If you're thinking, if the problem is hungry people, well, what's the preferred state? It's not just the elimination of hunger. It's maybe having access to abundant food supplies that are nutritious and flavorful, culturally appropriate, and produced in regenerative ways. There undoubtedly are other aspects of a preferred state for a food system that's doing what we as human beings want it to be doing. And then you're going to define the problems, and the preferred state and the problem state are interrelated. They feed off each other. The preferred state will be when you first do it, will be a first draft. All of this will be reiterative, meaning as you go down the road and learn more, might come back, you'll need to come back to the preferred state and add to it or modify it. So we define the problems, we define the present state that the problems are embedded within. We look at what are the alternatives, the artifacts that might that lead to the actions, and designing a preferred system. What is it? You know, what happens? Does it work? Where does it go and when? And the general costs and impacts. So you want to design the preferred system. And that's a great deal of what the Global Solutions Lab is all about. That's one of the products that comes out of it. What is the pathway, the solution, the strategy to making the world a better place for solving a very specific problem? And then to design the implementation, you know, before you can have that solution that you come up with impact the world, you've got to test it, you got to prototype it, refine it so that it's ready to be scaled and move up into the world at a scale that will impact the systems that you're trying to change. So moving into this thing a little bit more specifically, the preferred state is the most important part of any design or problem solution. And to be a little bit more explicit about that, the preferred state is the goal, where we want to go. It's based on our values. You know, not our definition of the problem, of what we want to avoid, or not what we want to fix, but what we want to make, to bring into existence. And not to, where is what is our vision for the world in terms of this problem situation, whether it's food, hunger, education, climate change. What do we want to see? It needs to be positive and visionary. It's based on what should be, not incremental improvement, not the Band-Aid. You know, as such, it brings people together and enables compromise and collaboration. I'll explain a little bit more about those phrases. It's the behavior of the whole system, not a part. It's inclusive, not exclusive. What I mean by not incremental improvement, and brings people together and enables compromise and collaboration. I'll give you one example. It was a study, not a study, a plan that Russell Akoff and a team of people many years ago were hired by the city of Paris to put together a plan for the future of Paris. Well, they put together a plan that had at least 3 components that were objectionable to any loyal Parisian, any French person. It violated the sensibilities on numerous fronts, but nevertheless, the plan was approved unanimously by everybody. You know, the city government, city council, the mayor, the state government, the federal government, you know, the unions, the secretaries, everybody approved this plan unanimously. And the reason they did, it was positive and visionary. It called for Paris to no longer be the capital of France. It called for Paris to be the intellectual and cultural capital of the world. And in light of that, those objectionable things, which were substantial, were relegated to the background. And those 3 things were: 1, it called for Paris to no longer be the capital of France. And and the reason that became necessary is you can't have the capital of any single country also be the capital of the world. That would be fought tooth and nail. So that was something that people could back off on. Okay, if we're going to be the capital of the world, let's not be the capital of France as well. It meant that Paris had to be an open access city, that anybody from anywhere could access it. It also had to become a multilingual city. And those of you who are familiar with the French pride in their language and its purity and not wanting it corrupted, and Paris becoming a multilingual city could be, for some people, a threat to their sense of who they are and this language they speak. Anyhow, that was also able to be compromised on, and the the end result was the acceptance of this plan for Paris to, to transform into the capital of the world. All right, so if you have a visionary and positive preferred state, it allows people to work together, it brings them together, enables compromise, and allowing people to back off of strongly held positions that might be holding the current system in its place. It's inclusive, not exclusive. It's a definition of a healthy system of success. As such, it organizes the path to its completion. It deals with increasing the capacity of the system, not just solving the problem. So in other words, the preferred state has got some serious importance. Most current efforts to improve society are directed at getting rid of what we do not want rather than getting what we do want. And getting rid of what we do not want often results in getting something worse. Again, it's Russell Ackoff. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. You've seen that quote before. Here it might have some renewed significance in light of the Paris story. All right. This is, again, an overview of a certain part of the design science planning process. Choose the problem, do the preferred state, the problem state, define the present state. And you want to define measurements of the problem state. What's going on in terms of the data, the numbers, how many people, if we're dealing with hunger, how many people are hungry, where are they, what age are they, what's going on with them. You're going to want to better understanding the present state, the better will be your solutions. So that you want to really delve into what is going on in the present state, the bigger picture, the bigger system, because that's where some of the solutions might be found. And you want to define measurements of the preferred state. For example, with all of this, to define the problems, if you choose a problem and let's say it's hungry people, well, the obvious simple or simplistic solution, well, we don't have enough food, let's grow more food. That'll solve the problem. Well, when you get into the present state, you'll find out that, well, that might not be the case. We're currently producing way more than enough food for everybody on this planet, that in fact, if it were equitably distributed, we all consumed it, we'd all have the unpleasurable prospect of dying of obesity. That you'd find out that in some parts of the world, over a third of the food is wasted or lost, post-harvest lost, wasted during transportation, preparation, etc. And so it might be not that we need more food, it might be that we need a better way of distributing it. You might also find out when you look at the present state that it's the poor people who are going hungry, whether they're in Bangladesh or Boston, whether they're in the sub-Saharan Africa or in South India. It is the poor people who are going hungry. So maybe poverty has something to do with hunger, not the amount of food that's being produced. So you want to delve into what's going on in the present state, the context for the problem that you've picked, and not just deal with a symptom like there are hungry people. If you're going to solve hungry people, you're not going to go to the grocery store, buy a bunch of food and mail it to wherever somebody's hungry. That is not a sustainable solution, and it won't address the real underlying causes of hunger, for example. The same set of criteria are going to apply to education, climate change, lack of energy, all of the problems facing the planet. All right, so how do we know if we're on the right track? We want to measure things. And this is, again, a little bit more of an elaboration of the process. We're adding a few things as we go along. After we're into the problem, the artifacts and alternatives, we're going to figure out exactly what are our options. And the job is to design a set of actions that get us from the problem and the present state to the preferred state. All right, the preferred state, we've already identified it and why it's so important. the first thing we do, choose the problem. The second is define the preferred state. And the preferred state for the planet, this was developed by a group of people over many years ago. And, you know, for the planet, they said, well, the preferred state, everybody ought to have abundant food supplies, clean water, adequate housing, clean, safe energy, education for all, clean, regenerating environment, access to health care, a cure for diseases, et cetera. It basically, if you summarized it, stood back from it. It's meeting the basic human needs of everybody on the planet, fulfilling the basic human rights, and regenerating the environment. So that was their preferred state for the planet. It can be an instructive template for formulating the preferred state for a local community or a country, as well as a specific problem. And so define the preferred state is really a key aspect of all of this, along with the preferred state. The present state contains the problem state. The present state is not the problem, but it's the problem is built within the system of the current world. You know, if it's hunger, people are hungry. You know, 800 million people, you know, are threatened with severe food shortages, malnutrition, et cetera, in the world. Well, that's built into the present state of the world. That includes the entire food system of production, distribution, consumption, et cetera, but also the energy system, the transportation system, the government, banks, everything is in the present state. And now the alternatives, you know, after you've got delved into the present state, you're going to discover that there are alternatives out there to producing more food, you know, from hydroponics and aquaculture to different increases in efficiencies, ways of cutting down on post-harvest loss and waste and stopping the loss of huge amounts of food in the system, as well as ways of getting it to people who might not have the resources in today's skewered, prejudiced economy for paying for getting food supplies. Maybe an alternative in that arena has to do with producing food by people without much resources, you know, local food production, whether it's high output gardens or window-based hydroponic units, whatever it could be, or it's a way of making sure that food is a basic human right and is guaranteed by the governments, and that there could be creative arrangements even with corporations to make sure that you know, their taxes are lowered if they're contributing to making sure everybody has got food supplies. I'm not positioning or offering any of those quote wild ideas as a solution. I'm just saying that where you're going to find them is in the present state. Cutting edge technology, cutting edge strategies for implementing things, for distributing stuff, as well as old ideas that are out of history, which might have not been technologically feasible 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Okay, so moving along here, the artifacts, you know, that are needed. What are the artifacts needed to get us to the preferred state? What technological and organization artifacts are available that will solve the problem, build a capacity of the system to meet its needs, to realize the preferred state? And the artifacts, alternatives come in at least two varieties, you know, hardware and software. Hardware being the, you know, let's say the food production unit or the cell phone or the satellites. The software being the organization of those resources or those artifacts in ways that get the job done, that reach the preferred state. So they can be policies, programs that are implemented, you know, at a government level, local government, local community and neighborhood, or globally. All right, so the preferred state that is going to be designed is, you know, what it is, what happens and how it works, where it goes, how it gets to the preferred state, when, and the general costs, where funding might come from and impacts. And then moving into the implementation of it, going after we've picked the problem and done the preferred state and designed a way of getting to the preferred state with a set of technologies and policies and programs. To implement it, there's got to be a proof of concept. You know, what what does it do, and what do we need to do to make sure that it does what we say it's going to, and you know, who is going to implement it, what are they going to do in the first 6 months, the first year, and what are the results going to be. And so this preferred system, the design for it, that the next step in it is to test it out, to make sure that it works. It can't just be a report in a document. It's got to go further so that it becomes something real that you can implement in the world. So there might be a need to develop the specific artifact, modifying something or putting together something in a creative way. Like Steve Jobs put together, you know, the first iPhone was, you know, something to a continuation of the process where they had built a music system, you know, a small system replacement for the Walkman that would store all of your digital files of all your music. Well, the new phone did that, but it also did a bunch of other things, including, you know, it had maps, but it also had the ability to place a phone call. Now, that mini computer, very powerful, which today is more powerful, as most of you know, than the supercomputers back in the day of the, you know, the 60s and 70s, even 80s, that artifact had to be developed and tested, the prototype, the proof of concept. Another part of this is to document the results of the preceding process and communicate it, communicate the plan to the people who might be able to take it and run with it, scaling it. Some of the output might be a business that could meet the needs that you're trying to meet, to reach to get to the preferred state. It might be a program that an international organization like, you know, UNESCO or the World Health Organization or the UN Environmental or Development Program could run with and make a big difference in the world. Or it could be something that an NGO could implement or a foundation could fund. Whatever it is, it needs to be communicated to the people that can go with it. There needs to be a compelling argument for its implementation. By compelling argument, I'll give you an example. A small group of people, very small, you know, you count them on your one hand, changed the world. And they did it by creating a compelling argument. And the compelling argument consisted of just information. So they created a lever that moved the world, tipped the world in the direction that their values dictated. And their values said, look, smallpox, we need to get rid of it. We've got a cure. We've had a cure for over 140 years. Smallpox has killed more people on this planet than all the wars in all of history. And if it didn't kill you, it left you fairly horribly disfigured. And so what they did is that was their preferred state, a world free of smallpox. And they knew that there was alternatives. It wasn't just the smallpox vaccine, but now it was the organizational capability to reach people in remote villages who were carrying it. They also knew that smallpox, science had progressed. They knew that if they got it out of the human system, it was gone for good. And so they created a plan. And in the course of researching the present state, they found out that smallpox, the then current costs of controlling it, vaccinating people, dealing with its consequences and stuff, was over close to $200 million. And the current, when they got to their bottom line of what it would cost to eradicate smallpox, it was $300 million, which was way more than any of these people had in their savings account or access to. But what they did is they pointed out to the large governments of North America and Europe, Japan, they said, look, you invest $300 million in this program, we eradicate smallpox, and you will save 10, 20 billion dollars over the course of the next 10, 20, 30 years. They got the money, they implemented the program, and smallpox was declared gone from the world. Now, the World Bank and World Health Organization issued a report, now it's about over 2 years ago, that pointed out that the savings to the world economy has been over $40 billion since the smallpox was eradicated. So for this fairly tiny investment, they got back, 100-fold, way more than 100-fold return on that investment. That was a compelling case for the eradication of smallpox. Similarly, compelling cases for the eradication of hunger, of other diseases from polio to measles to lack of education, illiteracy, lack of adequate energy supplies, poverty. You can make very compelling cases for getting rid of all of those, quote, diseases of humanity, so that we live in something closer to our preferred state for what we want the world to be. All right, so what is a compelling design and plan? Well, one, the preferred state is compelling. It's visionary, it's attractive, people can get behind it. Yeah, I'd like to see nobody on this planet hungry, or facing the prospect of being hungry, or climate change to not have the impacts it's projected to have, or whatever it might be. It's compelling. And the design that is developed gets to that preferred state. And the design gets to the preferred state with present day technology. It's not using any fantasy magic wand, instantaneous teleportation between here and Mars or Andromeda, but it's present day technology, meaning it's doable. It's not something you got to wait for some fantasy to come true. The design gets to the preferred state with known resources. You don't have to discover another giant reserve of lithium under whatever, New York City or London. It's known resources right now, and the design and implementation are, quote, affordable. I'll say more about affordable soon, but the more affordable, the better. The more affordable, the better. The more people who win, the better. The benefits, not only in terms of dollars, are bigger than costs. You invest X, get 100 times that back. But the affordable also needs to bear in mind that the current economic system is skewered towards making a profit, not making the world a better place. And we need to value the lives of human beings. The US government currently has a price of around $10 million on every human being when they're doing their cost benefit analyses for whether a policy or program should be implemented. For example, if they pass a law, everybody's got to wear seatbelts in their car. Well, if it's going to cost $1 billion to implement that program, and it only saves 2 lives, well, they're probably not going to do it. But it saves, if it saves 1 million lives, and the relative cost of implementing the program is very tiny compared to the savings in lives, then that program gets implemented. All right, punchline. If we were to put a price on, or a value on, the lives of all the people in the world, eliminating hunger, malnutrition, illiteracy, etc., and climate change is a no-brainer. It was very compelling and very affordable, looking at the world from not just an economic who profits and how much, but how better off the world is, and how much more intellectual capital, creativity, imagination, problem-solving abilities are released on the world from a healthy population. All right. Also, not only is it affordable, but it's understandable, the better. The people, the mass of people out there can get behind it. Yeah, getting rid of smallpox, I'm all for that. I've seen what it can do. I might have even lost somebody to that disease. The more sustainable, equitable, regenerative, resilient, the more people positively impacted, the better. Now, that list doesn't stop. There could be other things that need to be considered, but compelling design and plan are critical to the success of the program. So segueing from the methodology of design science to the Global Solutions Lab, it uses the design science methodology to develop viable regenerative solutions to global and local problems that are implementable with today's technology and resources in ways that will impact the world positively. All right, all the stuff I've said in the two talks, the Design 101 and the Design Science Methodology, are going into much greater detail in the Design Science Primer. If you want a free copy, you can download a PDF at the Design Science Lab under resources. There are other resources there as well that might be of interest. And the Global Solutions Lab, if you want to learn more about it, go to the designsciencelab.com. There you'll learn when the next session will be and a little bit more about it in some detail. So thank you for being here, for listening to this. Leave you with this: think big, start small, act now, and don't forget you're a designer. Design the world you want to live in. Thank you for your attention.